in studio today. Joining me is the Erik Bay, and we're here to talk a little bit about some of the pro sports going on throughout the world, and kicking it off with a couple of stellar Canadians, starting with Nick Taylor. Nick Taylor won his second PGA Tour championship here and won it at Pebble Beach, going wire to wire, first Canadian ever to do this. And from Thursday to Sunday, leading the entire way, shot a 2-under on Sunday to get that -19, winning over some pretty amazing golfers, including lefty himself, Phil Mickelson. And Phil Mickelson actually has won at Pebble Beach more times than Nick Taylor has top 5 finishes in the last 3 years. So that's really saying something. He's really stepping it up there. And he will be joining a couple other Canadians at the Masters. There will be 3 others to make 4. And that's actually tied for the most Canadians ever to play at the Masters, Erik.
No, great to see for sure. And we're kind of starting to see that now with those Canadians starting to succeed in some of those sports where you don't traditionally see Canadians, Bianca Andreescu in tennis. And obviously we've had some more success from Canadians in recent years. And I think you can kind of tie that back to Mike Weir when he won the Masters. Seems like a long time ago now, but you're just starting to see those guys start to turn pro. And now it's great to see Canadians having more success and especially overcoming some struggles like he did there on that last day at the tournament.
Yeah, and Mike Weir, as you mentioned, he'll be one of the other 3 Canadians who is eligible and invited to play at the Masters this year, so that should be exciting. Keeping with the Canadian topics, we got some women's soccer where there were a couple absolute standout Canadians there.
Yeah, for sure, and I mean, obviously, it's great to see them qualify for the Olympics. They were in tough, obviously, against the States, haven't beat them since 2001. But, I mean, they have a ton of young players coming up. I mean, Christine Sinclair has been there, it seems like, forever, obviously. She's been still killing it, obviously breaking the record for most goals scored internationally. But, again, you're starting to see, like I said, with Weir, those people coming up, watching her grow up. And now, obviously, Jordan Huitema, she won the Golden Boot there for most goals with 7. Kadesha Buchanan's been coming up as well, just 24. So a great nucleus to kind of build around and maybe hopefully challenge the States here coming into these Olympics.
For sure, and another team that is Canadian who's looking to challenge the U.S. at these Olympics and who actually just had a battle for themselves is the Canadian women's basketball team. So the women are really picking it up here for Canadian international sports as they beat Sweden in the finals by a whopping 30 points. The score was 80-50 with everybody coming off the bench with a lot of groups scoring there between Kia Nurse getting 10 points of her own and a couple others just really standing out and pushing them towards the Olympics. Now, Erik, Canadian basketball this whole year between the Raptors and Kawhi Leonard winning and now with the women qualifying and absolutely dominating Sweden. How has this sort of just improved Canadian basketball as a whole?
Oh, it's going to be amazing. Obviously, with Steve Nash making the NBA 20 years ago or so, you see those guys coming in now, watching him, idolizing him, and this is going to take it to a completely another level here. We're going to see probably 15, 20 years. All these people growing up, we saw how the country came together during the Raptors championship run. They're on a 14-game win streak right now, so they're still doing well, and we're going to see that. You have the women's team they can look up to, all the great Canadian basketball players in the NBA right now, so it's going to be amazing to see what all this does here. And again, those 15, 20 years, it's going to be exciting, not only basketball, soccer, golf, whatever it may be.
Now, as we're on the topic of Olympics, the NHL, NHLPA, and Olympic Committee have been in talks about NHL players possibly getting back into the Olympics. What's your take on this, Ebe?
I mean, I've always wanted to see the NHL players in the Olympics. That's what we kind of grew up on. It was tough to see them out last year, and I really think this is smart for the NHL. They've obviously wanted to expand into that Chinese market, get some people over there in the East enjoying hockey, obviously 1 billion people, lots of fans there, and what better way to kind of showcase that, show it off, than have the best of the best playing together in an exciting tournament.
Well, that's my thought. We always you always see the best of the best in every other sport. So why can't the NHL join in on that? And like you said, try and make some green off of that, get some money, and expand the game in general as a whole there, Ebe.
All about that green, all about that green.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll see. And I mean, I'm personally very excited for these Olympics. And, I guess only time will tell how Canada will do at these. in studio once again with Erik Bay, continuing our talk with the sports world, I guess, and keeping with the professionals. In the MLB, there's been quite a stir throughout this whole offseason, but especially as of late. Mookie Betts, one of the best baseball players out there right now, being dished from the East Coast all the way out west.
Yeah, that's right. He's making the big move out west. Him and David Price are now joining the LA Dodgers. That trade was finally finalized after we thought it was done there last week. There were some issues, so now obviously those two going out west. And coming back to the Red Sox, they do get Alex Verdugo, kind of a utility guy in the outfield there, still young, 23, and a couple of prospects. But this is really tough here for the Red Sox. Obviously, you're losing a guy who comes just 1 year removed from that MVP season. David Price, a solid number 3, especially at this stage of his career. So again, tough for the Red Sox that they are trying to downsize that cap while kind of remain competitive, and it's just been gutting to their roster here.
Now, David Price, he's a guy who's seen, maybe not the entire playoff success, but he's had quite a bit of wins and had a good ERA during that time. What does that mean for the Dodgers, who have, they can't quite get there every single year?
Well, what it means is no more excuses. I mean, you look at their lineup, they still have that murderer's row even before Betts. Now with Betts, he hit 346 when he was MVP. And now you got that top 3 with Clayton Kershaw, Walker Buehler. David Price fits in there nicely. They still have Alex Wood as the 4 guy. So, I mean, you look at this lineup and who can compete with them in the NL and even on the AL side? I mean, you have the Yankees, obviously. They loaded up on the offensive side. Garrett Cole this offseason. The Astros, I mean, still scandal, but they still have a solid nucleus there. So it's time to make the rubber hit the road here and see if they can get over that hump and not turn into the Nationals of the past.
Now, on the Red Sox side, how does this affect them? Obviously, they're getting a young utility player, like you said, but they're losing 2 big holes in their lineup.
So this could go, I think, one of 2 ways. Either it just continues the people heading out the door in Boston. Obviously, JD Martinez, their hard-hitting DH there, he's assigned his option here for this season, so it could depend here what he wants to do. And obviously they have some big contracts coming up. They did just sign Andrew Benintendi back for 2 years, $10 million. So it really depends if people either want to leave or if they can take this. They have that cap room now. Obviously David Price was making a ton of money, and do they use that now to sign their young guys? Rafael Devers will be coming up here, and can they re-sign guys and now build up and become competitive here in 2-3 seasons?
Now, as you mentioned, cap room, we're going to shift it over into the NHL, where the trade deadline is fastly approaching, and there's already been one move by the Toronto Maple Leafs with the LA Kings, adding some depth there. What are your first thoughts on that trade?
I mean, I think it's a good trade for Toronto. Obviously, with Anderson being hurt at that time, you don't know how long he's going to be out. And Michael Hutchinson obviously had not been doing it. He'd been struggling. So Jack Campbell, he was a solid option there last year for the Kings, and he's still done fairly well. So I think this just kind of solidifies that back end and gets them a little bit maybe to still make the playoffs.
And, there's a couple other teams, obviously, still in the hunt who might want that little extra kick. Let's kick it off, I guess, with the Calgary Flames and the Edmonton Oilers being the 2 Alberta teams. These 2 teams, obviously in the playoff hunt, but what do you think that each of them needs, I guess, to get over that hump and go a little further?
I mean, yeah, you say they're right in the thick of it. That Pacific Division is kind of a mess right now. Pretty low point totals for each team. I think for the Flames, they need somebody to kind of solidify that back end, maybe a Brendan Dillon type, a more defensive defenseman. And then obviously they've struggled. They've been spotty scoring kind of all season. Players aren't having their best years, so I'd say maybe a Mike Hoffman. He might be a little too expensive. I know they've been talking about Tyler Toffoli, so somebody like that on the wing who can help out. Then, like I say, for the Oilers, obviously defense has always been kind of an issue. Defense it is they still need, maybe, like I say, a Brendan Dillon type, a Joel Edmondson maybe, a little cheaper, somebody who can solidify that bottom 6 and help out there for the stretch run.
Yeah, I agree completely with you on the defenseman aspect for both teams. And you mentioned Brendan Dillon. He's a great shutdown guy, and I think he would fit nicely into that Flames lineup. If you look at their lineup, they don't have that many shutdown D-men. They got Gio, who can kind of do it all, but between Hanifin, TJ Brody, there's a lot of offensive guys. I don't like Dillon as much as as an Oilers possibility for the fact that, you know, they have a lot of middle pairing type of guys. I think they could go after a guy like Alec Martinez possibly, maybe even Matt Dumba, being an Alberta boy, might want to, you know, bring him in. And although he's having a down season, he's still got a couple years on his contract, and we know he can produce. So that's something that I like to see the Oilers. But you're right, you know, defense wins championships. That's what you always say. So, I mean, those are two things that, you know, each team really has to take care of heading down the line here.